They trained him to strike hard. They never taught him when not to strike. In a mountain village swallowed by pine, fog, and old rituals no one questioned anymore, a young warrior learned discipline the only way his world understood it. Through repetition, pain, and applause. Steel rang every morning. Breath was measured, muscles obeyed. Yet beneath the armor, something trembled. Each challenge felt personal. Each glance felt like judgment. Fear did not live in his hands. It lived in his hunger to be seen. Strength, he believed, was noise. One winter morning, after a needless duel left blood steaming into the snow, the crowd dispersed in satisfied silence. Victory had been declared. And that was when he noticed the old man standing at the edge of the training ground. Unannounced, unarmed, unmoved. No insignia, no lineage. No reason to be there, and yet the air bent around him. "You train the body," the old man said, his voice barely louder than falling snow. "But you leave the ego in command." The warrior laughed, not from confidence, but reflex. What followed was not an argument. It was silence, dense, heavy. A silence that pressed inward, stripping excuses, peeling identity layer by layer. The kind of silence that forces a man to hear his own fear breathing. Days passed, then weeks. The old man did not teach strikes or stances. He watched, he waited, he denied reaction. He corrected nothing, and in doing so, revealed everything. The sword dulled, the mind sharpened. Attention became the battlefield. Slowly, the warrior began to sense it, an ancient system hidden beneath technique. A path where discipline ruled fear, where presence dissolved conflict before it formed, where strength no longer needed witnesses. Because the most powerful form of strength was never loud. It did not announce itself. It did not seek victory. It was invisible, silent, unbreakable. If this silence stirs something buried in you, remain, and walk this path further. The illusion of loud strength. They called him strong because he never stepped back. In the village, strength had a sound. The crack of wood against bone. The sharp intake of breath before impact. The crowd's low murmur swelling into approval. From childhood, the warrior learned this rhythm. Strike, be seen, be remembered. Each victory stitched his name deeper into the village memory. Yet inside him lived a quieter truth no one ever asked about. Every challenge felt urgent, not because it threatened his body, but because it threatened his image. A younger fighter lingering too long in his gaze, a whisper behind his back, a pause before applause. These were the real wounds. His discipline was real, but incomplete. An ancient system practiced without its inner core. He trained the sword. He ignored the spirit. There was a locked drawer in his mind he never opened. Inside it lived the fear of being ordinary, insignificant, replaceable. And so, when provoked, he reacted instantly, mistaking speed for mastery, noise for power. One night, after another public victory, he stood alone, washing blood from his hands. The water ran red, then clear. Applause faded. And for the first time, the silence felt heavier than any enemy he had faced. Because when strength needs witnesses, it already knows it can be taken away. Transition. And it was this fragile hunger, not the blade, that the old man had already noticed. By morning, the village spoke of him again. Victories grow louder in retelling, sharper strikes, braver stands, impossible odds rewritten as certainty. Yet something subtle had shifted. The warrior felt it in the way his chest tightened before training, in the way his breath shortened when eyes lingered too long. The applause no longer fed him. It demanded more. Neuroscience would later name this loop, reward without regulation, dominance mistaken for safety. But the ancient ones knew it differently. They called it ego untrained, a fire that consumes its own fuel. He began to notice how often his body moved before his mind arrived. How anger leapt ahead of awareness. how fear dressed itself as urgency. Each reaction etched a deeper dependence on noise. And dependence, though hidden, is a form of weakness. That night he dreamed of a burned ledger, names crossed out, victories erased, his own left blank. He woke unsettled, gripping the air as if reaching for proof. Transition, and into this quiet fracture, the presence of the old man began to press more heavily than any blow. The man who needed nothing. No one remembered when the old man began appearing every morning. Only that once noticed, he could not be unseen. He stood at the edge of the training ground where the fog thinned and the pine trees watched like witnesses who never testified. No weapon at his side, no emblem on his robe. He did not interrupt practice, yet somehow the strikes grew less confident, the shouts less certain. Presence has weight, and his settled into the ground like a stone dropped into still water. The warrior felt it immediately, a tightening behind the ribs, the old reflex to do something, to speak, to assert. Silence, when unchosen, feels like exposure. Modern science would later call this cognitive threat response, the ego interpreting stillness as danger. But in ancient language, it was simpler. The old man needed nothing, and that terrified those who needed everything. When the warrior finally confronted him, expecting correction or praise, the old man only looked at him, not through him, not above him, but at him, as if reading a burned ledger no one else knew existed. "You move quickly," the old man said, "because you are afraid of what happens if you don't." The words landed softly. The impact was anything but. Transition, and in that moment, the warrior realized his loudest battles had always been against the quiet. After that day, the old man never offered instruction. He simply remained. Each morning, the warrior felt his presence before he saw him, like pressure before a storm, like a held breath that refused release. The village began to shift around this quiet gravity. Conversations shortened, boasts softened. Even the children struck the wooden posts with less fury, as if something unseen had entered the rules. The warrior watched closely. The old man never flinched, never reacted. When insults were thrown his way, they fell uselessly, like arrows striking mist. This was not detachment born of weakness. Neuroscience would later call it emotional regulation, the prefrontal mind governing impulse. But the ancient path named it mastery of the self. One evening, the warrior noticed a thin red thread tied around the old man's wrist. Faded, frayed. Not decorative, not explained. When asked about it, the old man only smiled. "Some truths," he said, "lose their power when spoken." That night, the warrior dreamed of a locked drawer slowly opening on its own, and inside, nothing he could use as a weapon. Transition, and with nothing left to strike at, the warrior was forced to turn inward, where the next battle waited. Fear beneath the armor. The first thing the old man took from him was structure. No bell to signal training, no opponent to mirror his force, no crowd to absorb his excess. The warrior was told to sit alone at dawn, unarmed, facing the forest edge where fog erased distance and time lost its markers. Hours passed without instruction. Knees ached, thoughts screamed. Without movement, fear surfaced, not as panic, but as a low, persistent pressure behind the eyes. This was unfamiliar territory. In battle, fear had direction. Here, it had depth. Images rose uninvited. Moments of hesitation, a father who never praised, victories that faded too quickly, the terror of being forgotten once the blade dulled. The armor he had worn for years, discipline, reputation, aggression, offered no protection here. The old man watched from afar, saying nothing. And in that silence, the warrior began to understand the first forbidden truth of the path. Reacting was easier than seeing. Violence was simpler than presence. Modern science would call this exposure without escape, the nervous system forced to regulate itself. The ancients named it differently. They called it meeting the shadow without a weapon. Transition. And once fear was no longer resisted, it began to reveal what it had been guarding all along. Days blurred into one another. The village noticed his absence from the training ground, whispers threading through the alleys like a quiet accusation. Some said the old man was breaking him. Others said this was a rare ritual, one never written down, passed only when a student was close to collapse. Inside the warrior, something loosened. Fear no longer surged outward as rage. It turned inward, exposing its source. Neuroscience would later describe this as regulation replacing reactivity, the amygdala quieted by sustained attention. But the ancient path spoke more plainly. Fear is energy trapped without direction. One evening, alone again, the warrior noticed a cracked wooden post near the forest line, bound loosely with a red thread. He had struck it countless times before. Now, he only rested his hand against it. The post did not move. Neither did he. For the first time, restraint felt stronger than force. That night, he dreamed of his armor hanging empty, swaying gently, no body inside. The dream did not frighten him. It clarified him. Transition. And with fear contained rather than expelled, the discipline of silence began to take shape. The discipline of silence. Silence was no longer something that happened around him. It became something he practiced. The old man set a rule that felt almost insulting in its simplicity. No unnecessary words, no explanations, no defense. The warrior was to move through the village as he always had, but without reacting. When challenged, he was to pause. When insulted, he was to remain still. When misunderstood, he was to say nothing at all. The first provocation came quickly. A younger fighter mocked his absence, questioned his strength, tugged at the old identity like a loose thread. The warrior felt the surge, heat in the chest, jaw tightening, hands remembering their purpose. This was the familiar crossroads. He chose stillness. The moment stretched. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for noise. And then something unexpected happened. The mockery collapsed under its own weight. Words, unanswered, sounded foolish. The aggressor grew restless. Silence had exposed what force never could. Modern psychology names this impulse control, delayed response, identity detachment. The ancient system had a harsher truth. The ego panics when it cannot perform. And in that panic, it reveals its weakness. Transition. But what silence began to dismantle in others, it now threatened to tear apart inside him. Each day, the restraint grew heavier, not because it was difficult, but because it stripped him of the habits that once made him feel real. Silence removed the mirrors he had relied on. No reactions meant no confirmation. No defense meant no identity to protect. The ego clawed for relevance, whispering that he was disappearing. At night, he noticed changes in the village. Arguments died early. Men spoke more carefully around him. Some avoided him altogether. Silence, it turned out, unsettled others more than aggression ever had. Neuroscience would explain it as uncertainty triggering projection, people revealing themselves when no emotional signal is returned. The ancient path called it simple. Still water shows every crack. One evening, he found a burned ledger buried beneath the training hall. Old names, old victories, reduced to ash. The old man had never mentioned it. He didn't need to. The message was clear. History holds no one. The warrior closed the ledger and did not replace it. For the first time, his strength no longer leaked outward. It gathered, condensed, quiet. Transition. And once silence became stable, the path ahead could no longer remain hidden. Walking the invisible path, he returned without ceremony. No announcement marked his reappearance in the village. No challenge issued, no posture assumed. Yet people felt it before they saw it, the way a room senses a shift in pressure before a storm that never arrives. The warrior walked slower now, not from hesitation, but from control. His gaze did not search for threats. It rested. The first challenge came as it always had. A familiar voice, an old rival. The words were sharp, designed to hook the past version of him. Insults wrapped in memory, accusations tied to pride. The crowd leaned in, ready for noise. But the warrior did nothing. In that pause, fear surfaced, not in him, but in the challenger. Silence reflected uncertainty back at its source. Modern psychology calls this non-reactive dominance, the nervous system refusing escalation. The ancient system called it invisible strength, power that cannot be pulled into someone else's game. For the first time, the warrior felt it clearly. Fear no longer pushed him forward. It stood beside him, informational, contained. He had stopped proving himself, and the world did not know what to do with that. Transition, but the path that cannot be seen is always tested one final time. Whispers followed him through the village like a second shadow. Some called his calm arrogance. Others said the old man had hollowed him out. A few, quieter than the rest, sensed something more dangerous, a strength they could not measure. The town itself seemed altered by his return. Voices lowered, conflicts ended sooner. It was as if an unseen rule had entered the air. One evening, he passed the training ground and saw the cracked post still bound by its red thread. A younger warrior struck it wildly, desperate to prove something. The post held. The boy did not. The warrior said nothing. He only watched. And in that watching, the lesson transmitted without words. Neuroscience would describe this as modeling regulation, calm, teaching calm. The ancients understood it differently. Presence reshapes space. Later that night, the old man was gone. No farewell. No trace but the faint mark of footprints that stopped halfway across the frost. The red thread lay on the ground, cut clean. The warrior picked it up, unsure whether it had been left for him or taken from him. Transition, and with the mentor gone, the final understanding could no longer be delayed. Mastery. Without witness. Morning arrived without announcement. The old man did not. No footprints led away from the village. No farewell lingered in the air. It was as if presence itself had been withdrawn, leaving behind a silence sharper than loss. The warrior searched the edges of the forest, the training ground, the place where fog thinned and lessons once waited. Nothing, only stillness. For a moment, something old stirred. The reflex to chase, to ask, to demand a final truth. Then it passed. Mastery, he realized, does not cling. Attachment would only prove the lesson incomplete. Days unfolded. The warrior trained again, but differently now. No audience, no record, no tally kept in burned ledgers. He rose before dawn, tended small tasks with care, breathed through discomfort without naming it an enemy. Neuroscience would call this identity integration. The self no longer split between performance and presence. The ancients had fewer words. They called it becoming the path. In the evenings, he noticed the red thread woven quietly into his wrist wrap. He did not remember tying it there. That unsettled him, not with fear, but with understanding. Transition, and in that understanding, the final test revealed itself, not as a battle, but as a choice. The final test did not announce itself with danger. It arrived as emptiness. No challengers came, no crises demanded response. The village moved on, quietly reorganizing itself around his presence without ever naming it. This, he realized, was the most dangerous moment of all. When nothing threatens you, the ego invents reasons to return. It whispers that peace is stagnation, that invisibility is erasure. He felt it one night while standing alone at the edge of the forest. The cracked post still stood. The burned ledger remained buried. The red thread rested against his skin, warm as if alive. Everything that once defined him had dissolved, and nothing new rushed in to replace it. Modern psychology warns of this stage, the vacuum after transformation, where identity can regress if vigilance fades. The ancient system was more severe. It offered no comfort, only responsibility. Strength, he now knew, was not something achieved once. It was something protected daily, in silence, in restraint, in choosing not to become who the world expects you to be. As he turned to leave, he noticed something that made him stop. In the frost, beside his own footprints, was another set, fresh, deliberate, and facing the opposite direction. He did not follow them. And yet, long after they vanished, the question remained. Had the path been watching him all along, or had he finally become someone worth watching? What remains when no one is watching? Long after the footprints disappeared, the village returned to ordinary time. Children grew taller. The pine trees shed needles and reclaimed them. New names replaced old ones in conversations, just as the burned ledger had always promised they would. The warrior remained, not elevated, not diminished, simply present. Those who passed him felt steadier without knowing why. Conflict softened around him, as if resistance met something it could not grip. This was the final, quiet truth the old man never spoke aloud. True strength leaves no monument, no story that survives intact, no proof that can be pointed to and claimed. Modern science would call this internalized regulation, a nervous system no longer hijacked by fear, no longer dependent on validation. The ancient path used fewer words. It warned that strength shown too often rots into performance, and performance eventually demands an audience. The warrior understood now. Mastery is what remains after the desire to be witnessed dissolves. It is the discipline you keep when no reward follows, the silence you choose when reaction would feel easier, the path you walk when no one claps, records, or remembers. And yet, standing alone one evening, he felt it again, that faint pressure behind the ribs, not fear, not pride, something watching. Transition. Because the most unsettling question is never whether you are strong, but whether you would remain so if no one ever knew. He learned, over time, that the world does not reward this kind of strength. It passes by it. It overlooks it. It mistakes it for emptiness, for passivity, for something unfinished. There were days when the old reflex returned, a brief urge to step forward, to correct, to demonstrate. Each time he noticed it without judgment, the way one notices weather forming at the edge of the mountains. Discipline, he understood now, was not suppression, it was stewardship. The red thread frayed slowly at his wrist. He never replaced it, he never removed it. Some things, once earned, are meant to fade naturally. Neuroscience would describe his state as coherence, the alignment of impulse, awareness, and action. The ancient system offered no such comfort. It warned that mastery is fragile, not because it is weak, but because it is quiet. And quiet things are easy to forget. One night, passing the training ground, he noticed the cracked post had finally split. No strike had caused it. Time had, weather had, patience had. He rested his palm against the wood, feeling the grain give way. For a moment he wondered, not with longing but with clarity, how many times the path had tested him without his knowing. How often true strength had been offered invisibly and refused because it made no noise. As he turned away, the forest was still, too still.